The first connection I want to make is between sensitivity and porousness. So if we think of a microphone, it is a neutral membrane that responds as it picks up sound waves, as it picks up energy. So it's neutral and it's responsive. Now, a very crude microphone, for example, a reversed speaker, will pick up dull sounds, but will not pick up the full range of sounds, and certainly not with high fidelity. Fidelity simply means accuracy. We get infidel as the person that diverges from the copy. You create the ideal, you create the vision, the shape, and then an infidel loses coherence with that shape. The copy is imperfect. The person is wayward. They diverge from the way. And we insult this, but it's worth noting that all evolution is wayward. Meaning evolution exists with a protocol of the copy, and the dandelion sends out 1,000 dandelion seeds, and most of them are pure copies. But on this end of the spectrum, the dandelion seeds diverge in this way, and in this end, they diverge in this way. So what happens in the abundance of life is the copying takes place abundantly. One dandelion produces 1,000 dandelion seeds. If it was the other way around, if one species or one pattern of energy required 2 patterns of energy to come together and produced one, as in the one-child China policy, you get the inverse happen. You get a dying off of the species, and so very rapidly there will be no more of that lineage. So as a general rule, life creates many copies of itself. And on both sides of the spectrum, so you have the middle, you can look at it as a bell curve. On both sides of the bell curve of the norm, you get the minority mutation. You get the divergence from the norm. And the divergence is always the minority. This ensures that the dominant pattern can and will continue. And it also ensures evolution, because all innovation, all great ideas, all evolution begin with a small minority of divergent people, of divergent ideas, of divergent technology. Meaning if after the stereo was invented, every stereo was an exact replica of that stereo. 2 speakers, a cassette player, or it was actually a radio. No cassette players back then, right? So just a radio and 2 speakers. And if every iteration, if every copy of the stereo was an exact clone of the last stereo, then the stereo would be immortalized as a bulky, analog-tuned stereo with no batteries and very crude sound, relative to today's sound, and no Wi-Fi and no Bluetooth and no CD and no digital download, none of that. It's just going to stay an exact copy. But evolution dictates that the next person who creates a stereo tries to get it smaller, and the next person who creates a stereo tries to add flying sound, and someone else says, let's combine an incense burner with a stereo. And so it mutates all around the edges. And some of the mutations take, and most of them don't. So you get, many good ideas, and most of them don't germinate, don't become the next great thing. They die out. People rather save the $10 than get an incense burner built into the stereo. The flashing lights, were irritating when someone tried to sleep, so that one didn't become a bestseller. But the person who made it smaller, that grabbed a majority. And it got smaller still, and that grabbed a majority. And then batteries, then a whole new market segment opens up, right? And so life is all about the mutation. And the mutation always occurs in a distinct minority. And the protocol for life and evolving and growing is simple, right? If life threw all of its eggs in one basket, then what if that basket doesn't work, right? So if a dandelion sends out all 1,000 dandelions as the next big thing, this is the dandelion that glows in the dark. It consumes more energy. It's not as competitive as the original, but the glow-in-the-dark dandelion. And, what a great idea, enthusiasm, excitement. And the dandelion sends out 1,000 dandelion seeds to glow in the dark. Well, you don't get any more dandelions from that lineage if it turns out that glowing in the dark means it gets eaten more by night grazers as well. I mean, horses learn they can graze at night as well. They just, they don't have to sift through the poison grasses and this. They don't have to look for a dandelion. They can just wander over and, a nice glow, there's one over there, and we'll eat it, right? And so it, gets eaten more than all the other plants. That's the first problem. The second problem is it's not growing as vigorous a roots because it's spending all this energy glowing, and so it just dies. It dies out. And other dandelions that didn't have the great idea of glowing in the dark, well, they just keep on growing. And so life keeps on growing. So the dandelion doesn't put all of its eggs in the new idea. What the dandelion does is it puts 95% of its energy, or at least 80%. That's where you get the 80-20 principle that shows up so often. The dandelion puts 80% of its eggs in the old basket, the one that's tried and true, the one that works. 80% goes into that basket. And so these are all these dandelion seeds over here. And this means that if none of the good ideas work, if none of the mutations work, the adaptations, that the dandelion will continue its lineage. But if it turns out that there was a home run, if this was the mutation where the stereo got smaller, like if this dandelion is growing in a desert-like context and it's a drought-tolerant mutation, its mutation is to add a slight angle to each leaf that reduces direct sunlight, that reflects 5% more heat while consuming less energy. You see, the leaf was pure, it was reflective, it was absorbent. And now the leaf is crinkly, it's impure, the shape has been distorted. The integrity, the fidelity has been lost of the original signal. But now, the leaf reflects 5, 10, 7% more light back to the sun. The crinkles hold more dewdrops in the desert. And that's its main source of water. And it's not spending all this energy just, when you're a plasterer, you're plastering a wall, mixing the mud and, it's plaster or mud, it's this lime mix where you're going to prepare for paint. Mixing the mud is not all that, it doesn't take all that much energy. And splattering it on the wall with a big trowel is pretty easy. But then you spend this enormous amount of energy getting all the walls smooth. Get all the walls smooth. And then, of course, once you get them smooth, the slightest little dent shows up, and you're spending all this energy troweling it. Is it smooth this way? Is it flat? Are there any imperfections, etc.? Now, the troweler that says, let's do a new look. Let's just, I like that look. And done, right? So the troweler is consuming a lot less energy. There's no fidelity. It's not like these pristine things. It's a mottled look, right? Well, the brain tends to notice anomalies, appreciatively or critically. It notices anomalies. So the first person who saves a lot of time and energy troweling their wall, in a random pattern, took very little energy and draws attention. Now, if that attention is favorable, if someone says, "Oh, what an interesting design," so all these boring flat walls, and so, I see those are boring. They're not high quality plastering. They're not high talent flat plastering. They're boring plastering. I see. You see, and if that becomes a mindset, we have to get rid of this boring plastering, dear. Let's just bring in this plasterer. And so now you create demand where this plasterer is spending 1/3 of the amount of time to get 2/3 of the amount of attention. Well, other plasterers are going to follow suit. I can do that. That's easy. You just do this and do this and do this. And a boom comes of the chic, the ragged jean looks. I can do that. I can make holes in my jeans. And so we have a new norm, and then the jean company gets machines that will tear and stress and wear out, and the jeans companies, it's like, wow, this is great. Their jeans are going to fall apart in less than a year, and then they'll have to buy more jeans. And we'll charge them extra to put holes in it because, we can say it's a lot of work to sandblast these jeans and do this and, put the color on sloppily and all that. So it's wonderful. They have to buy more expensive jeans, and then they've got to do it because all the cool people have holes in their jeans, right? And so now it's the new norm, the new normal. And, just a boring pair of, undeteriorated jeans. I'm not going to be seen in them, right? So it becomes the new norm. So life puts most of its eggs in the basket of the norm based on one simple principle. The norm is still here. Meaning 99.9% of all life is now dead. If you look at all the species on the planet, etc., it's all 99.9% of all those unique patterns of energy, they're now dead. No longer exist. But what does exist are the things that have worked out at this moment in time, right? So what we're looking at is the norm. When you look around and say 1 million people all agreed to vote for democracy, or what you're looking at for the current norm is less than 1% of 1% of all that has ever been. And so it's a pretty good bet. I mean, if you say 99.9% of stuff died off in favor of this, well, it's a good place to put a lot of your eggs in one basket. 99.9% of the population thinks that shoes are a good idea. Let's go with shoes for now. We can innovate, on that later and maybe fiddle around with the design. But it's working to get into the 1% that made it, right? And so that's where that copying impulse comes from in life. It's working for you and you and you. It's the easiest thing in the world to copy it. I'll do that too. And there's a good chance that that's going to work out for me. But over on this side here, we have the minority, and we have the minority. And the minority doesn't work most of the time. First of all, the majority always rejects the minority. The majority of the majority always rejects the minority. If they didn't, then it would switch and there would be an instant adoption of the minority. But typically, and this comes from the conservation of energy as well, the easiest way to live your life is to look at what the majority are doing and copy them. Now, the majority write all the laws. So if you are doing the things that the majority are doing, the majority never write laws where they're bad. Like you'll never have a president of a country write a law that says that if a president of a country makes a mistake, that they have to pay for it. Right now the taxpayer is paying for all of your mistakes, right? You do this, you do that. It's a bad idea, right? Billions spent of taxpayer money for your bad idea. Why don't you cough up and pay for it? But a president will never write that law because then they have to pay for it, right? People, generally speaking, do not behave in a structured, conscious manner in such a way that will increase their own chronic suffering. They usually behave in such a way that will increase other people's chronic suffering, but will bring them benefit. That would be a normal path of behavior. It's called sociopathic. But sociopathic makes something good for me at the expense of other people. Now, sociopathic has a place in the evolutionary continuum. It is a norm, right? And if you copy the norm, you don't have to think, which saves energy. You're not going to be ostracized, which gives you the benefit of the network effect, right? If you're plugged into a strong network, there are efficiencies of scale that make your life easier in areas if you are plugged into a network. So if you're plugged into a network, you've got efficiencies of scale. You've also got this thing called belonging. Most networks identify, the group think says that if you're doing what I'm doing, you're like me. And if you're like me, you've got to be protected because I'm important. I need to be protected. And we can't have me dying out. And you're like me. So it's almost as good. We can't have you dying out because we're part of a network. If our whole network, just dies out, what would I do if I was all alone? So we need lots of people like me. We We need lots of people thinking like me, behaving like me, doing like me, etc. And then we'll all protect the network. Kind of makes sense, like a phone network. If you will put a pole in the ground like this and run a wire like this, of this kind of wire, and connect it in a little box like this, then you make the network more valuable. And now my phone can call further and has more options. So it is instinctive to be racist. It is instinctive to be sexist. It is instinctive to think that whatever it is that we are is the best thing, is the thing that should be protected. And it is instinctive to protect that which copies me. That's no son of mine, says the coal miner whose son starts dyeing their hair pink and doing art. That's not what this family is about. We've been doing centuries of hard work. My father was a coal miner. I am a coal miner. My coal built this country, and you're drawing? Get out of here. I'm not giving you anything, right? Because you're not one of ours. You're not fitting the pattern. You're a divergent, a mutation. We don't want any of that round here. We don't want your brother to get your ideas and give up on the tradition of coal mining. Coal mining is an important industry, right? We die for this country with lung cancer and this and that and that, and you're just going to throw it all away for painting, right, or doing art, right? And so there's a natural instinct to reject the mutation. So every mutation has to survive the rejection. It's on its own. It has a mini network. The first glow-in-the-dark dandelion, it doesn't have other glow-in-the-dark dandelions to talk to, right? How does it understand itself? Why am I glowing in the dark, Dad? I don't know. You deal with that. We're not going to glow in the dark. We're not going to come over by you either. You're being eaten by horses. Get over there, What do I do? Stop glowing. I can't. This is who I am. Oh, let's beat the dandelion. Stop glowing. Stop glowing. Why you? Look at your mother. She's furious. Hide. Don't come out in the company. We don't want anyone to know. We've got a glow in the dark dandelion around here. It's like put a blanket over him. Everything's fine. No glow in the dark dandelions around here. So there's anxiety. What does this mean? We don't know. We don't know. You have no idea what it means to have a glow-in-the-dark dandelion. You have no idea. The ripple effect. Maybe the glow-in-the-dark dandelion is a few mutations away from a flying dandelion, a glow-in-the-dark flying dandelion, that the chemical compounds, etc., and that's going to make the difference. Because you don't know it, but this whole island is about to be submerged to rising sea levels. Now, that hasn't happened for more than 10 million years, but it's going to happen in the next 1,000 years. The sea is going to rise to a point where the waves no longer recede after the storm. It's going to rise. And once it gets over this ridge, the valley is going to be flooded. And the only dandelion from this little atoll that succeeds, that becomes part of life's endless continuum, the only one is the flying dandelion. And so the very dandelion that you're rejecting, that's different, is the one that's going to fly, that's going to leave the atoll, that's going to fly for thousands of miles in the wind, and going to take root on another land where there aren't any horses. There aren't any horses. It's going to see in the dark. It's going to be able to fly, right? And a whole new norm, a whole new normal is found. But the majority, as a general rule, doesn't like change, doesn't like divergence, doesn't like, you think of the curse words. You're weird. That's an accusation. It's not a scientific observation. It's an accusation. You're weird. You're a mutation. You're different. I don't know what to do with you. You're a mutant. Kill the mutants is an instinct of the majority that doesn't want a minority in its midst. Kill them. Kill them. Because they're different. Now, difference does two things. It requires the majority to develop a relationship, a relay of energy, that takes more energy for the majority. You have to think. You can't make assumptions when somebody's different. If someone says and walks up to you and you're shaking hands, how are you? How are you? Great, everything's fine. I can do that all meaninglessly. Hi, how are you? I know how to do that. Do I have to feel warm? No, I have to say, hi, how are you? I know the pattern, right? But if someone replies, I have spondylodyphilis. What? I said, how are you? You're supposed to say, fine. No, I have spondylodyphilis. Oh, what? And what most people will do is they'll turn away at this juncture. They'll turn away at this juncture because I wasn't actually prepared to think. I wasn't prepared to learn anything. I wasn't prepared to engage. I wasn't. All right, nice to meet you. Bye. Right, and now. They didn't know what spondylodyphilis was before. They don't know now, and they don't have to learn a whole new protocol. They can just shake hands with the normal people who don't have spondylodyphilis and who say that they're fine, regardless of what they're feeling and all that. They know the drill. They say that they're fine, and no one has to think anything, and no one has to see anything, and no one has to develop a new problem or to solve or anything. We just do the things we have always done. We eat starchy foods and sugars and salts. We get fat. We make small talk, and it's wonderful, right? It's been working for generations. But you have spondylodyphilis. Oh, well, what's that? Well, it means that I can't hear out of one ear, and I get a sense of emotional tonal overtones out of this ear. Emotional tonal overtones? I haven't heard that word before. Another anomaly. Well, let me tell you all about. Now I've got to think. No, that's enough. That's enough. Nice to meet you, spondylodyphilis person. I'm going to avoid you for the foreseeable future because I don't want to have to learn what emotional overtones are and how they come in and what. I don't want to learn any of that. I want to do the thing that is normal, right? Be part of the 1%, right? But the 1% of the 1%, the normal is the 1% that made it, right? 99.9% of all the patterns of energy in life have just fizzled, right? They died, right? But I'm part of the 1% that made it, and I'm going to just copy them faithfully, do everything like my parents. There's that story with the the baking tin. You know, the one person comes over and this person is cutting off the ends of the pork chop, right? And both ends are cut off and discarded, and then the middle of the pork chop is baked in the oven. And he said, why are you cutting off the ends? She says, well, you know, my mother always cut off the ends, and so I assumed that's the thing to do. And so one day it was met the mother, and why are you cutting off the ends of the pork chop? Well, my mother, cut off the ends of the pork chop, and then, me and the old grandmother, grandmother, why did you cut off the ends of the pork chop? She said, oh, my baking tin. Back in my day, there wasn't Amazon and diversity of baking tins. And so, I cut it off because my baking tin was this big and the pork chop was this big. And so I had to cut it off to put it in. And so that's the problem with the unthinking norm. The unthinking norm is doing 99% of what it's doing with very little thought, other than that's what everyone else is doing, and that's what they did before. And everyone else is giving it very little thought either. And so it tends to be the mutation that actually challenges the status quo, the norm, because the divergent is interested in whether or not they, as the divergent, are superior or inferior on the intelligence continuum. Meaning, is the divergent more efficient at creating sustainable well-being or less efficient, right? If they are less efficient, they are cursed. And everyone who starts out doing something new has a small network. You think of the first fax machine. The first person who invented the fax machine, the ability to send a document over the telephone, you know what a big improvement that is? Write out a letter, lick the envelope, put a stamp on it, put it in the mail, wait 6 weeks. Did they get my letter? When are they going to reply? And then 6 weeks later, checking the post. And then someone says, well, I'm going to write a letter and stick it into this hole here. And they'll get another letter the same moment as it's being sent through. It's coming out the other end. How about that? No 6-week delay. We're now talking a 6-minute delay, 6 weeks. Down to 6 days, down to 6 hours, down to 6 minutes. Just exponential efficiency. But the very first person with a fax machine, the very first person, had no one to send a fax to. They had this great technology, but no one to send it to. And this is the frustration, the loneliness, the irritation of the mutant, of evolution. A fax machine is a step forward in efficiency, in intelligence, in speed, in flow. Evolution. And yet the first person with a fax machine, do you have a fax machine that I could send you a fax? What's that? Well, now you have to spend 6 weeks telling them what a fax machine is. Well, it's this thing. Well, I've never heard of that. Well, you look it up. Okay, I'll get a catalog mailed to me. And $1,200. It's like I can mail a lot of letters for $1,200. Do you realize fax machines? $1,200? Today they're a free piece of software. Today it's been upgraded again to email. $1,200 to send a letter to, you've got one, I've got one, and nobody else has one, right? How do you how do we justify spending $1,200 to send a letter to one person a bit faster? I'll just write it out, I don't want to read that manual and all this stuff. So iterations that are tremendous improvements die out all the time. But life hedges its bet. 95% of the dandelion seeds come out normal. And then on this side, there's a little bit less glow in the dark, and on this side, there's a little bit more glow in the dark. Life just pays attention to what goes on. On this side, the seeds fly for another 500 miles. On this side, the seeds drop 500 miles earlier. In other words, you take the same seed and the same wind, 500 miles further, 500 miles sooner. You see, and for that particular dandelion, either one could work. You have to be open to possibilities. Because let's say there's an atoll that's 500 miles closer. And so the dandelion seeds that learned not to fly as efficiently fall down to the ground 500 miles sooner, and they hit an island. And all around that island, for another 1,000 miles, there's no land. And so it is the dandelions that fail to fly as efficiently that become the new breed. Because the dandelions that could make it another 1,000 miles fall in the water and die out. And so it's ecologically contingent. What is the best mutation? If you're in a business where every business owns a fax machine, the most important decision you could make as a salesperson, as a correspondent for this or that transaction, would be a fax machine for $1,200. That makes you eligible to do business with. Because if you've got 5 car salesmen that have fax machines and will fax you over details, fax me the details, and you say, well, I'll mail it to you, and you'll get it in 6 weeks. Maybe there's a lower price, but, these 4 people have all sent me the details, and this is the lowest price. And I'm sure the other one, and maybe it's more, maybe it's less, but we've got to make a decision. And so one more used car salesman down, right? So this is nature's protocol to copy the norm. And the norm, for the most part, self-references. It doesn't think it through. It doesn't analyze. It just says, we're doing it because we're doing it, and that's why we're doing that. And that's good enough for me. But the mutant... Now, in that bell curve, by the way, the mutant is at the beginning or at the end of evolution. And it's also the mutant is at the beginning of the end, but it's also contextual, right? Because sometimes evolution, meaning if you think of survival of the pattern going forward, is to do worse. They used to be able to do this, and now they don't have that. That's a competitive advantage. To learn to fly worse is a competitive advantage as a dandelion seed. If there's a piece of land that the long-flying dandelion seeds have been missing, or in a military campaign, like if you're sending your rockets the farthest they've ever been sent, so you're launching your rockets to bomb the enemy, right? And the enemy's, right here, but you've sent rockets further than they've ever been sent before. Very exciting, right? Except they're going right past the enemy, right? You're here, the enemy is 700 miles away, but you found the 1,000-mile rocket. So you're shooting them, well past the enemy. You're making a new enemy, but doing this. So it's very exciting. It's just it's worse. We need cheaper, cruder bombs that don't fly as far. And so your crude competitor that doesn't know how to mix fuel properly, they shoot the longest they can shoot and lands right where it's supposed to, right? And so there's all kinds of accidents and ignorance, etc., about this whole thing. But the point is that the norm is going to be the majority and is always going to be in the middle. And at the end is going to be something that is inferior and superior relative to a particular environment, right? If your enemy was actually 1,000 miles away and you were sending them 700 miles away, because you couldn't mix fuel right properly, and then you fixed the fuel formula, and now you can get the rocket to fly 1,000 miles. Well, now your mutation has made you a winner in that battle, or a potential winner at the very least. And so your mutation has worked in that environment. In the other scenario, increase the fuel and you send the rocket 1,000 miles, but the enemy is 700 miles away. Not so much. So it's all contingent on relationships. It's all about what's going on in the environment. If you've figured out how to have 10 times more children, currently people are having 1.7 children in developing or highly developed countries, right? So they're dying out. And so, if you can figure out how to make 10 times as many children, it's wonderful. Up to a point, right? Up to a point. And then at some point before 1 trillion people occupy one planet, all having their own house, somewhere before 1 trillion people occupy one planet, the oxygen is used up, the food is used up, whatever, and then it's no longer survival. Because once all the oxygen is used up and all the food is used up and all the fishes are fished, well then nobody exists, right? So you go from 1 trillion to nothing. This is the cancerous crisis. The cancer develops this new evolutionary technology. It uses your energy here, and it creates this and this and this and this. Cancerous energy grows and grows and grows, and it's so exciting because it's growing faster than you are, and all this thing, and cancer is spreading over here and over there and all these different places. And the cancer is making good progress. Like, we're making headway. We entered the arm. Quick, grow in there before they can get rid of us. Okay, over here and over here. But then on the last day, cancer's great triumph, we took over the brain, we took over this, and then the body dies. Dead, right? Dead. Hooray, we're the winner, right? And then nothing. The cancer is dead a few days later because it so efficiently consumed its host body that there's nothing left, right? There's nowhere else to expand, right? Whereas if you have a symbiotic relationship, you take, you create. It's the same with the tax system. The government raises taxes, and so it's wonderful. It's wonderful. We're getting more and more money. We can hire more government employees and da-da-da. Just at some point, the businesses go bankrupt. It's like, I can't pay my employees and buy my food and buy the supplies and pay you 70% in taxes. I just can't do it. So I'm closing up the business. What? Don't go. We want 75. Yeah, but it's not worth it. You can have 70%, you can have 80% of nothing, 90% of nothing, but not 70% of my 12-hour days. Maybe we'll, okay, go back in business. We'll only charge you 30%. Really? Really? You get it all up and going, and then you start increasing it, more inflating my costs, this, that. So you have, this balanced relationship, right? And the relationships that work well are relationships of balance, relationships that give more than they take, that grow the pie so that there's more and more to go round, right? But not so much, not so much that if you're creating a salmon pie, you can't grow the pie so big that there's no more salmon to have offspring. So, this is all a relational dance. Now, this is fidelity, right? Fidelity of the sound and the attraction, the infidel, the fidel, filial, the one that is faithful to the norm, to the family system. So we'll take a short break here and continue the meanderings. We started off talking about sensitivity because it correlates with fidelity. It corresponds with reactivity. And it corresponds with permeability and the viral transmission of energy. So a virus is a pattern of energy that is transmitted and largely copies its original shape. Now, the virus, like anything else, mutates, but a virus is a transmission. And permeability correlates with susceptibility to a virus. Sensitivity, if we use the microphone analogy, a very sensitive microphone that can pick up big wavelengths and small wavelengths and tiny wavelengths, is a high fidelity microphone. It is a permeable, meaning if you have an impermeable shape, an impermeable membrane, it does not respond to sound, it deadens the sound, it stops the sound. So all energy is in a form. All the energy around us is in a form, and that form is susceptible, that's yes on the yes-no polarity, or unsusceptible, that's no on the yes-no polarity, to energy migration, or the migration of form from one energy to another. So everything is in relationship with everything else. There's a relay of energy between all things. And when different energy forms come together, either neither changes the other very much, or both change each other a lot, or one changes the other. If you pour water into a cup, the cup doesn't change shape, the water changes shape. And so we're talking about this quality of permeability. And innocence has a correlation with permeability, with reactiveness, with responsiveness. Because innocence allows, innocence trusts. Innocence has no resistance. So when you ask a child to touch my penis, if they understand the words, it means absolutely nothing. Now, to a cultured individual, a member of a cult, this has all kinds of meanings. Some positive, some negative, it depends on the cult. But everything has meaning. In a state of innocence, there is no meaning. There's no innate ascription. Now, certain things have meaning, innocent or otherwise. You touch a fire, it burns, you don't want to feel bad, so you pull back. But you say these words, fucking, mucking, bucking. It's just sound, right? There's no innate negative consequence. Bing, bang, bitchy, batchy. It's just sound, right? In the landscape of innocence where meaning has not been symbolically ascribed, there's no knowing, right? That's why when a 2-year-old insults you with a joyous face, my father says you're this or that, whatever. You understand, this is before meaning has been ascribed, has been prescribed for that symbol. And so the symbol is meaningless. It's just sounds. But we build systems, we build architecture of meaning based on history. And we all want to feel good. We all want to avoid feeling bad. Statistically, that means being part of the group as a mammalian species, as a pack mammalian species. We want to be part of the network effect. And so, in the innocence, in the stage of innocence, we follow whatever it is that is offered or prescribed or done or whatever, and there's no understanding of the history of those meanings. Now, those meanings get built up over time. For example, if you live in a culture that values bits of paper that are called money more than it values bits of paper that are called greeting cards, and values those bits of paper so much that people will steal them, people will cheat, do this, whatever. People will try to gain those bits of paper because the meaning of that paper is the difference between rank and contempt, right? Contempt doesn't feel very good. So if you're in a culture, a cult, that correlates the value of people with the value of those bits of paper, and that's a very important person, bow to this person because they've got lots of paper. And this other dynamic, don't talk to those people. They don't have any paper, right? Well, the paper, of course, has no innate meaning, but when it's been ascribed the meaning of the value of a human being, well then, to throw away bits of paper becomes a sin, becomes a sign of stupidity, right? You threw away the bits of paper that were going to make this family feel important. It's an unforgivable crime. We were going somewhere as a family, and then you had to throw away those bits of paper. How can we signify the importance of this? Well, we have to punish you. We have to discipline you. No more bits of paper to you. You have to stay out of the house, because if you're in the house, you're near the bits of paper and you could further degrade the value of this family, and and then we'll be treated with contempt. And so there's all these meanings that get sorted out and prescribed. But the meanings have to be viewed through a lens. The lens defines the meaning. The shape of the lens defines the meaning. And most of the meaning comes from the network effect, because if you just have one person running around the neighborhood saying, don't look at trees. If you look at trees, you're worthless. Don't look at them. Don't look at them. Don't look at trees. They're worthless. If it's one person, well, it's obviously a little bit silly. Where did you hear that? You don't take that very seriously because it's a network of one. But if the entire neighborhood walks around and anytime anyone looks at a tree, they react outrageously, they cast out the people who look at the trees the most, who do this, well, then it becomes very serious, not because of the trees, but because of the network effect. Meaning now it's a network of everyone that you're in contact with. And if everyone you're in contact with treats you with contempt, casts you out, then that's a very big deal. That's a very big deal because as a pack mammalian member of a pack mammalian cult, of a pack mammalian species, it's a big deal to have access to the network. You think of the internet, it's a network of computers. Well, if you're cast out of the network, you can never use the internet again. You have lost access to one of the most powerful resources on the planet, information, in abundance, in the network. If no one will hire you in the village, you've lost access to the network of capital. And in a capitalist paradigm, if you don't have capital and everyone's measuring you based on capital, well, then you can't exchange anything. You don't fit into the network. Well, what about seashells? Remember when we used to exchange seashells? Yeah, we're not doing that anymore. You got seashells, but you don't get any access. We'll give you 50 cents for a seashell. But this used to be worth 10,000 sestertii. This is the nicest. Well, we're not doing that. You've lost access to the network. Now, because the network is such a big influence, then you have a continual tension as people try to define the network in such a way that would increase their rank within the network. Because within every network, there is a hierarchy. Within the capital network, there's a ranking system. And the ranking system begins within the network by valuing up more than down. That's why heaven is up and hell is down. So the rank will be vertical, having decided that higher is better than lower. A higher amount of money is better than a lower amount of money. A higher person is better than a lower person. A high-class person is better than a low-class person. So now rank is being, the first hierarchy is being established as a vertical hierarchy, measuring height. Well, now there is a tension to decide what is the highest, right? And this is the tension to define divinity. That's not the highest. This is the highest. Because of this, and this, right? And this is mental architecture. This is the architecture of language. And you can generally find a context, some context, to validate anything, right? If you're stuck on a burning island, the highest valued resource might be the ability to fly. Well, I've got a plane. Well, suddenly your rank goes up within the community because you have access to a technology that correlates to well-being. That's the underlying foundation of rank, of value hierarchy. If you're in a desert, water is necessary and scarce, so it goes up in rank. If you're in a flood, water is abundant and destructive, so it goes down in rank. So rank correlates to what's going on, what's going to create the well-being at the moment. And whatever that is, right now we're in the information age because information has the highest rank, meaning the right information can bring enormous wealth, enormous well-being more efficiently than any other resource at the present time. So we are in the information age, which means we create the information war, the battle to see who can control the information, who can produce the information, who can transmit the information, and which information is the most valuable. Now that comes into the paradigm of the story. There's a story. There used to be a story that said that going to university was the most intelligent and important thing because universities had the most useful information. So you'd pay $50,000, $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 to go into the best university and get the best information. Now that was based on the narrative that said that people with university degrees and $300,000 of debt in a capitalist framework would make more money in that framework than somebody who didn't have a university degree and was digging ditches for, $10,000 a year, right? That the net profit of a university was the right thing to do. So you have a ranking. The ranking, do you have a university degree and which university did you go? Because that is the fidelity, the quality of information and the quality of the network. If you went to this university, you had a network of acquaintances and colleagues and people that had access to important resources to well-being. So the war to control the network is part of deception and truth. William Randolph Hearst had a newspaper business and understood that paper was going to be a big commodity, and understood that in the capitalist network that having more money was more important. Having more money was more important than almost anything else. And so what Hearst did to increase his rank within the network was he first acquired newspapers, so the information, which puts Hearst in control of information. Now, with that control, he can use his influence of deciding what to inform people about to point people in a variety of different directions. He can point them this way or this way based on the focus of his media. And what Hearst did was he acquired a lot of forest suitable for paper. So he acquires that, but it's low ranking. It's not very important because at the time, a lot of paper is being made from hemp, right? And hemp is easier to grow. But Hearst has a plan, right? He's got a low rank resource that has been ranked low by the cult because paper is being made from a variety of sources, including hemp. Now, Hearst buys up the forest. Then he uses his resource to swing people against hemp. And he does this with FUD, fear and doubt, and various things. But basically, he goes on a campaign against cannabis. That's the first part. Then he continues the campaign with misinformation that hemp is innately connected with cannabis, right? So marijuana and hemp, he conflates those two. And he successfully creates the public fervor needed for politicians to ban hemp. No more hemp rope, no more hemp paper, etc., which now directs the attention towards trees. That's the other resource for paper. Now, as soon as that happens, this low-rank resource at a low price down here becomes a higher rank resource up here. And who owns a lot of it? Hearst. Well, now his value based on money is going up through deception, through planning, through control of information and influence. He has now turned, in the alchemical metaphor, lead into gold. So every cult has a rank. And the rank ideally correlates with actual well-being. It makes some sense that if you're living on an island and the entire island is in flames, that a plane would be up at the top of the list. A boat maybe, a plane, something to leave the island, beneficial, right? Versus being burned alive. So, that makes sense. And so that's one thing. And you also have this, interesting thing where, you can go up in rank by causing the scarcity or by responding to an existing scarcity. I mean, there is going to be a fire every now and again. And when there is a fire that is widespread, a plane would be useful. But if you have a plane, and this is where the divergence between empathic and sociopathic takes place. If there isn't any fire and you have a plane and you don't feel your plane is being given enough rank, you can start a fire, creating the problem that your resource is the solution for. And so here you have, a sociopathic machination within the cult where I'm going to start a fire because there isn't enough work for firefighters at the moment, and then I'll get a job, right? I'll just need some cash. Let's start a forest fire, and then we'll go and put out the flames. We're a military organization where our budget is dwindling. Let's go plant false information to start a war so that our role is justified. Now we're in great need, right? Because there wasn't a war before, but now there is because we started it. And so now we have to be funded because, we're the best. We've moved from a low rank irritant because who wants to take money away from schools and organic food and, limousine buses and beautiful landscapes and, tax deductions and investments in the future. Who wants to take money away from great banquets to create loud, noisy bombs? Nobody in their right mind, right? Because bombs don't taste very good, right? But in order to facilitate the high ranking of a military expenditure, the comparison cannot be between a banquet and a loud, noisy object that makes a mess, a bomb, right? It has to be between you being helpless and blown up and terrified and everyone you love killed and invaded and dominated by a bully, or spending money on loud, noisy things that blow up and, damage the enemy. And so in that hierarchy, the one is better, because in every situation, there is something that brings about more well-being, and there's something that brings about less well-being. There isn't a context that doesn't have a technology that brings about more well-being and brings about less well-being. And so that creates the framework for all hierarchies within the cult. If you show up with a box of ice cream and everyone's sweating out in the sun and a bit dehydrated and very hot, suddenly you become the hero. You become the resource towards well-being. And so, there's the competition. There's the competition because we are all unique to have our resources go up in rank. There's also the development of the resource. We're a cellist, and so cellists are usually the first to go. Let's see, we don't have enough money to pay one person in the cult this month. Farmers, no, we need them for food. Architects, we need them to repair the roof. Cellists, we're not going to pay the cellist. And if they go off to another, fine, but we've got our food and our roof. So there's, a hierarchy of that. So the arts in incompetent cultures, in cultures that lack high abundance, and there's a corollary between abundance and competence, because there's an endless, infinite amount of energy in the universe. There is an infinite amount of energy in the universe. And a highly competent person can take a very little amount of that energy and create superabundance. Enough food, enough medicine, enough sex, enough light, enough beauty, enough shelter for everyone. But that's competence. That's intelligence, turning a very little amount of energy into a lot of sustainable well-being, competence, right? So, if your cult doesn't have resources, well, then you get rid of the cellist, right? Because you don't have the competence. You don't have the skill to create superabundance. That takes competence. And so there's a hierarchy, and so who wants to be the one that's left out, right? Because in incompetent cults, there's always, much like musical chairs, there isn't enough chairs to go around. So someone has to be left out. And this is the outcast. Incompetent cults have outcasts. Resources they don't know what to do with. Resources they can't feed. Resources they can't take care of. Incompetent cults have outcasts. And nobody wants to be the outcast. And so there's a manipulation in musical chairs to, no, I deserve this chair and you should be the outcast and I deserve this chair. So you have a sociopathic competition for scarce resources as long as you have the incompetence required to be scarce, right? If you're competent, there is enough energy in my finger to power the entire planet. It's called nuclear power. And the reactors, there's enough energy in the form of nuclear waste to power all of the reactors in the world for decades without any greenhouse emission, just steam, right? And it can take nuclear waste off of the black market. It's less expensive. You don't have 4 million deaths from lung damage from coal plants, for example. All kinds of benefits. But you'd have to have competence to take a herd mentality that has seen a few disasters. You see, there's never been a film clip on the news that showed 4 million people dying every year from coal. Nobody thought to make it. And it'd be too difficult to create the montage because this person is coughing in this room over here in a Chinese city that's laden with smog, and this one is dying of asthma in India, and this one is you'd have to bring them all together and you'd say, this is coal. This is smog. And then you'd show the nuclear power plants and how many people died from nuclear power. You show 4 million, 4 million, 4 million, 4 million, and you'd actually have to educate a people that don't want to think and do their own research. In other words, it would be competent for people to move into the distinction between poorly run first generation and second generation plants to fourth generation plants. That would be competent, right? And there are other, fusion, where there's no waste. We haven't sorted that out, right? So there's so many things that are waiting to be learned that we haven't learned. And so we have scarcity. Ignorance, fear, and scarcity create pain. Pain creates fear. All pain creates fear. Because if you were competent enough to avoid the pain, you would have done so. And if you're not competent enough to avoid the pain, you're going to have pain again, and nobody wants it. All pain creates fear of the future. Because competent people don't create pain, and we look around us and we see pain after pain after pain after pain after pain. And we realize that we are in an incompetent cult, using an incompetent operating system to create massive amounts of pain and spending mass amounts of time, money, and natural resources to do it. Many of us are in suicidal levels of pain. We're in so much pain and fear of pain that there's more pain than there is excitement, joy, delight, and well-being inside our body, inside our pictures of the future. Well, that's the suicidal equation, right? To say, I don't want to feel pain, and I'm in more pain than well-being, and I don't have the competence to stop it, and neither does anyone in my cult, right? No one's coming along and showing me how to lift this pain off. So I don't want to be in this pain. I know there's more coming in the future. So let's just end it before it gets any worse, right? Because I don't want to be old and poor and in this amount of pain. And I don't have the competence to stay healthy or to become rich. And neither does my cult. Right? My cult doesn't have the competence to help me be healthy and rich. My cult doesn't have the competence to lift this burden of grief and pain off my body. And I don't have the competence. So this is not looking good. Let's end the equation, right? Let's give this body back to the planet from which it emerged, give it back its nitrogen, its fertilizer, let new plants grow, and maybe another time, maybe some other time. Maybe I'll come back some other time when we know what we're doing, when we have a chance to create more sustainable well-being than chronic and unnecessary suffering. But that's an important corollary between intelligence and suffering, between suffering and scarcity. And so the jockeying, the Hearst jockeying, to have to create an entire false field of information about the dangers of hemp. And one of the ways that he did it was by building on another bunch of falsehoods. So rather than a more statistical accurate thing, which would be that Caucasian people are terrorizing and traumatizing the black race, that's statistically more accurate. Instead, he created a narrative where black men were having sex with young black women because of cannabis. And this was such a horrific thought, the idea that young women could be enjoying themselves with the stigma, the stupidity of the dogma, right? Because in order to enslave people and feel good about yourself, you have to invent some kind of a story, right? Well, the story, the lie that was elevated to justify slavery was these people are not human. They're not as important as me. They're not Christians, right? Only a Christian has a right to enslave other people and rape them and kill them and work them to death and, torment them because, we'd never do that to another Christian, just to a slave, right? Treat thy brother like thyself. Well, he's not a brother, right? So you have to create a story that justifies the cruelty. And so having decided, this is a subhuman, then, cannot have that. Cannot have my daughter enjoying, a subhuman, this. So the frenzy, right? Based on the craze, the stupidity. All you have to do is get a few key figureheads and the herd will follow. Because the herd is the unthinking majority that is not trying to diverge from the norm. They're trying to copy the norm faithfully. To copy the family system faithfully. We don't hang out around those types of people. We don't do this type of thing. We don't say these words. We don't talk about that. We don't think this. We don't think this. We think this. We do this and we do this. And we associate with these people. That's our cult, right? That's our dogma. And if you conform, you get access to the network. If you don't, you become the black sheep. You get cast out. So nobody wants to be cast out. And so one of the jockeyings is if there have to be black sheep, which, this correlates to competency. Because imagine just for a moment, a competent culture. We're not too far away from that probability. Just imagine, if you will, first of all, fourth generation nuclear plants sweeping up all of the nuclear waste on the planet, buried in the ocean in rotting containers. Not a good idea, buried in mountains in, rusting 50-gallon, a bit wasteful, not all that smart. Imagine all that material being swept up into fourth generation or fifth generation nuclear. Zero chance of a meltdown, no big power lines having to go through sub-Saharan Africa and various things like that. You can just plant these mini sources that can just be left there generating energy for years. So what happens? Well, the cost of electricity goes to almost nothing. Everyone switches to electric cars because right now, you have to pay for electricity. So everyone switches to electric cars. 4 million people live more every year. And there is an infinite supply of energy for the new robotic wave. Now, how many people, given the choice, would like to take a walk in a beautiful garden and jog through a beautiful forest versus dig a ditch, versus put in irrigation lines? Now, when you create robots on a very low cost of energy, and you teach robots how to create robots, and when you teach robots how to take landfill material, all the energy we don't know what to do with, and basically say, well, I'll take this crumpled plastic bag, one robot cleans it, another robot shreds it up, another robot melts it to the right temperature and mixes it with this plastic, and then, there's a structure, an exoskeleton for a robot, right? And the landfills are being cleaned in this process by robots, sorting it through, etc. And then the robot is digging the ditch, and the robot is planting a garden. You do a design, you draw on your tablet, you show a photograph to the robot, and while you're sleeping, while you're at work, the robot is reorganizing, weeding this, transporting this, pruning this, connecting with other robots who want to get rid of it because their owners, did a different drawing. So one person's trying to get rid of a palm tree because they just did a new drawing, and one robot, is trying to find a palm tree to make the drawing look like the person. And so you come home and you see the wonder, the elegance of a three-dimensional garden that looks beautiful, and that you didn't have to spend 2 years saving up and doing this and that and the other. It was a network of information. Well, which world do you want to be in? I want to work hard and suffer in this. So we're moving into a possibility of super abundance. Now, with robots that can build houses, that can recycle things endlessly, let's take all this wood, grind it up, mix in resin, and create magnificent resin boards that are stronger and longer lasting than the original lumber with zero waste, and we don't have to cut down another tree. We recycle that energy. We become good at that. Now I have 3 mansions, and robots clean it and do this and whatever. Is it really that important to make sure that this person doesn't get a house? Well, we want the homeless to stay homeless. Is it really that important? So incompetence and the scarcity that produces incompetence is necessary to say things like, well, 27 years of your life is being erased as you lay chronically on the street, but, we couldn't give up our house. That's scarcity thinking, right? There's not enough houses to go around. Well, not for very long, right? When a robot can design a better house and build a better house and recycle an existing house better than you can, and you just say, oh, that's what you had in mind. Okay, do it. There's enough to go around. What about tunneling? What about all of the great, magnificent visualscapes in the underground tunnels? What about vast rock stadiums underground, constructed by robots, with the best lighting and complete soundproof? The neighbors don't have to listen to this for 3 miles just because your favorite band came through. Trees don't have to be cut down, right? And what if the robots are transporting all of the fill soil to level areas that are unlevel and unworkable? And once you have 8K screens that are more beautiful and better air quality that's created dynamically and flooded through pipes, wouldn't it be fun if a lot of the transportation happened in tunnels that are earthquake-proof, fire-proof, have zero traffic, are at higher speeds? A bird can't hit them. A bird can't crap on them. Wouldn't it be great if you could go in things like a Hyperloop, a la Elon Musk, at 800 miles an hour from city to city underground. And then when your pod is ready and your 4K screen inside your self-driving vehicle is done, you pop up and there you are, and it's a magnificent forest. It's a magnificent diversity of art, of beauty, of starscapes. And no houses and city street lights polluting the soundscape and the starscape at night. What if things were electric and you didn't have to listen to the neighbor's blower 3 hours a week, right, when you were trying to make a video? You see, with competence comes superabundance, comes creativity. There's an unlimited amount of space underground. Now, by moving spaces and doing air filters, etc., in factories and stuff underground, you can plant 10 trillion trees. You can plant the desert, such that the air quality above ground goes to a higher quality than any of our ancestors can remember. How about that? What if when a volcano goes off, you've got resources underground where the beauty is created by screens, where the air quality is pumped in and it doesn't need, there's a company that's selling clean Alpen air. What if it's all like that? And you just fan it down into your space and fan it up, and your house robot tracks how good your air quality is. If your lungs are a little bit difficult, you just pump up the oxygen. The filter brings in a little bit more oxygen so that you're in pristine conditions. A nuclear blast, a fire, a volcano, a meteor suddenly doesn't threaten the top as much. Everything above can be beautiful. Why not have all the self-storage garbage underneath, right? And skyscrapers, which just basically have a big screen, which often look at other skyscrapers and are broken up. When you have 30-foot by 30-foot 8K screens that can take you anywhere you want to be in the world, why wouldn't skyscrapers be downscrapers? And trees, ancient redwood forests, take their place to create the skyline, along with an increasingly biodiverse set of animals that are supported in their ecology with the management of robots. We're running out of bats. Type in a dynamic, the robot creates the perfect nesting space for bats, introduces a small colony of bats into that range, they expand, and mosquito populations are managed, right? So this is a terrain of superabundance that is generated by superintelligence, which correlates with supercompetence. Now, of course, once it's there, it's normal, it's not super. It's only super now because it's beyond our competence, it's beyond our intelligence to actually do this. But it's not hard. Just that one policy, we're going to play 10 hours of media on all media channels in the world for a week to educate people about the facts of 4th and 5th gen nuclear. The facts. Well, you can fight it, you can argue, you can doubt, that's fine. But anyone that's willing to think, let's say 1/3, well, it's not usually the majority that step into intelligence. It's normally less than 20%. So let's say 20% of the global population decides to embrace 20% of the countries all switch to clean, safe nuclear. And they start doing very well. Everyone switches to electric cars because all electricity is free in that country, because it looks more beautiful. You see, that's how intelligence is adopted by monkeys. Monkeys copy. The majority of people do not think things through. They follow the herd. That's life's design. 95% of the dandelion seeds are exactly the way the parent seed was. But over here and over here at the edges, there's a couple of anomalies. And then there's called the early adopters. Those are the people that have the intelligence that do think. That's a very small percentage of a species organism, of the human organism, that actually thinks and says, that's not a bad idea, that's better. And they adopt it. Now, everyone else, their job is to attack them. Dumb idea, no one will ever fly. If God meant you to fly, there'd be wings. Electric cars, we've done that before. Nobody wants electric cars. Private schools, you're ruining the public school system. You know, what do you mean to be sensitive to the environment? You know, so every single good idea, it's the job of the majority to try and destroy it, attack the character of everyone who's presenting new ideas. And they do, right? 95% of all great ideas and stuff. It's like, fine, if you have that attitude, go fuck yourselves and live your mediocre lives and enjoy hell, for a bit, and the majority happily settles back into the status quo of contented stupidity, right? This was good enough for my parents and my grandparents. It's good enough for me. All these newfangled ideas, let's get rid of them and all this. So, that's what their job is. Their job is to protect the status quo so they don't have to think, so they don't have to compare, so they don't have to expend any energy, and to protect a tried and true idea that has gotten them this far. Now, of course, because life is always growing, if you stay too long in any idea that's worked before, any idea, you're dead, right? The only things that are going to be around 1 trillion years from now, and life's just getting started, by the way. We're so worked up about if our planet goes up in a nuclear, holocaust. There's 1 trillion more planets. 1 trillion more planets. And all of the energy from our nuclear holocaust will be repurposed by other intelligent life forms that emerge out of that ecosphere of possibility, of probability, of reality. The possibility field dictates that everything that is possible will happen eventually, given enough space. And the universe gets bigger every year. And the timescape expands every year. There is enough time and enough space for every possibility that we can possibly imagine to unfold within the infinite timescape, the infinite spacescape of what is. We don't have to worry about life. What we have to consider is the following equation. It's a big plus to be lazy, right? If we're lazy, we don't have to think. We don't have to consider anything. We don't have to risk anything. We don't have to make any effort. We just copy exactly what was done before. And it was good enough then, and it's good enough now, and we die as clones. And it's so easy. It's just what did Dad do? Dad hit his kids and said this. Well, I'll do that too. When I'm stressed, I'll have a few beers and shout. And it was good enough for Dad. It's good enough for me. So I'm going to clone. I'm not going to think. I'm not going to wake up. Well, I'm going to do this. So that's a reasonable choice for the majority, right? Everyone saves a lot of energy. Nobody has to worry about newfangled ideas. But then you have the plus down here of change and innovation. We're going to try this and try this. Well, what's the benefit? Well, a minority of those technologies and ideas are going to lead the species towards evolutionary persistence, right? 99.9% of everything that's ever been on this planet has now died or radically changed. The dinosaurs have died or radically changed. So do we want to die or do we want to radically change? Well, the plus of innovation and exploration of a company, of an individual, of a relationship, a marriage, a friendship, or a species, the plus of innovation and evolution is the odds of us being around in 1 trillion years go way up. In other words, we're going to have to change thousands upon thousands of % to be around in 1 trillion years. We're going to have to change our bodies. We're going to have to change our paradigms. We're going to have to change our language. We're going to have to change the type of language. We're going to have to go from sound language to visual language, because visual language is 1,000 times more efficient. We're going to have to get rid of words and go straight to images. Image, feeling tone, image, feeling tone, image, feeling tone, I'm sending. Do you like it, or do you like your image and feeling tone better? Image, feeling tone, image, feeling tone. Ooh, I like that bit. I hadn't thought of it. I like that. So now we're going to come together. The transmitting of images and feeling tones is 1,000%, 1,000 times more efficient than me trying to capture the feeling in words, tiring myself out. This is exhausting, right? You don't see the image. You don't see the feeling. You don't see the beauty. And I have no idea what your images are because you're not sending them, right? So Neuralink, a small step in that direction. Extra sensory perception. Going into certain dimensions with compounds. Lucid dreaming, right? This is my dream. Well, this is my dream. Would you like to enter my dream, or shall I enter your dream, right? Entering this domain. This is exciting. This is intelligent. It's evolutionary. So that takes effort, right? Elon Musk is working 100-hour weeks, starting multiple companies to transform the car industry towards electric, to transform non-autonomy to autonomy, to move from non-ledgered fiat currencies towards digital ledger currency. Elon Musk is working very hard to create a very easy future. One where with SpaceX there's a chance that enough patterns of energy, enough patterns of life will be taken off planet so that if in 10 years we're hit with a meteor that takes us back to the Stone Age, that there will be technology and information off planet that can now be re-imported to jumpstart the evolutionary timescape. So this is the plus of thinking, of waking up, of analyzing, of designing, of intelligence. So one of the things you learn is, as Milton Friedman said, there's no such thing as a free lunch. These guys up here get hedonistic, soporific ease. I go to the job that I'm supposed to go to. I drive the side of the road I'm supposed to be. I drive the car that everyone says is the best car, whatever that is. I marry the person I'm supposed to marry, have my 2 kids, do this, get my TV, do this, and I don't like foreigners. I don't like any of those strange ideas. I just go along with the norm. Down here, everything's up for grabs. Down here, this. What about this? And what's the idea behind this? And the idea behind that, and the idea behind that. You take the architecture of thought all the way down to bedrock. And then you see, what context did that architecture develop in? Oh, I see. That idea, although false, kept the tribe alive in 1654. So they doubled down on that idea, the one that worked. And it did work, right? It did work back then in that situation. It was a brilliant idea. It was change. But now it's the crust. Now it's the enemy. So that's somewhat, of the tension between these two approaches. And what life says is that at least 80% of the reproduction of an energy pattern are going to be clones. And that those clones will protect their norm. They will protect normalcy. Stupid, beneficial, a point on the continuum that has survived to this point. Everything is stupid relative to a brilliant future. Everything is brilliant relative to a crude and uneducated past. Where we are today are the gods of 2,000 years ago, all-knowing, all-powerful, all-doing. The average person today can do things that would be considered a deity 2,000 years ago. So we could say it's the brilliant. We've become gods. Who we are today are Luddites, are fools, compared to where we will be in another 1,000 years. And we'll get to the point we would be in 1,000 years 10 times faster than it took us to get from 2,000 years ago to today. Time is speeding up because the reactivity level is speeding up. Now, this is the corollary of sensitivity, right? A sensitive microphone picks up all of the sounds and transmits them. Now, sensitivity is a neutral trait. You could call this insensitive, hitting a wall, and you call this permeable, sensitive, responsive. Sensitivity and a wall are both neutral traits. If a virulent disease is flying around the world, permeating the species, and it hits a wall, an insensitive, non-reactive, inert substance, a body that will not pass it on, that's called immunity. That's called a good thing. If a microphone picks up whatever it is we consider extreme obscenity, for some it's heavy metal, for others it's the opposition's political point of view, right? It's satanic, horrible, and broadcasts it loudly with high fidelity to everyone else. Oh, this is horrible. If the same microphone picks up with perfect pitch, with perfect representation, because the perfect microphone disappears. The innocent child disappears perfectly into the family system. He acts like you, he talks like you, he sounds like you, he does that just like you do that. Sensitive innocence is an exact copy of the cult, of the family system. The perfect microphone disappears, doesn't exist, and the sound of the singer's voice is amplified without distortion. It's not lowered, it's not increased, it is a complete neutrality as the transmission. Is the transmission a dis-ease or an ease? Well, a lot of this is short and long, right? The things that are a short-term discomfort are often a long-term ease, right? So an ease and a dis-ease were relative to the continuum of chronic suffering and sustainable well-being. We all want to get up here. We've decided that hierarchies are higher is better than lower, so of course we want to get up. We want to get up here to the hierarchy of sustainable well-being, of bliss, of joy, the beautiful flower. We don't want to be down here with the root, with the dirt, the dark mud, right? Of course, you see the flaw in the circle. There is no flower without a muddy root. You like the flower, you water the root. You're ignorant, you praise the flower, you curse the root. Get that dirt away from me. I want to admire the flower that is sourced out of the dirt, right? And so in the circle, it rejoins it. But we've taken so many things of a circular nature and we've stretched them out into what? Into a line. We've taken the circle and we've unbound it into an illusionary line. It's not real, right? If you keep pursuing the orchid, it will inevitably take you down to the dirt. I mean, that's how everyone begins. They pick the orchid that's so nice and the orchid dies. Why did it die? Why did it die? It needs the plant. Okay, you pick the plant. Why did it die? It needs the soil. Oh, I see. The flower leads me to the root. The pinnacle leads me to the dirt. So if I really want the flower, if I want beautiful, endless blooms, I have to compost dead things. If I really want life, I have to take the richest fertilizer. What's that? That's dead things, leaves, shit. Another curse word, right? Of an ignorant cult. Shit is the source of all life. But to the ignorant, it is a curse. Get it away from me. I just want beautiful gardens. I just want to live. Well, you don't get to eat without shit, and you don't get to live without eating. So when you pretend, right, that there's this linear line rather than this circular line, you know, the best circle is you eat well, you shit well, you compost the shit well with other dead things, you fertilize the food well, delicious food grows, and you eat well. See, that's a circle. All life is circular. All cults are linear. The cult has the hierarchy, the endless up. You know, if faster is good, we should go even more fast. If efficiency is good, then be even more efficient to a point where, you know, time is money and you do this and you do this and you do this so you can do that and so you can make more money and can do this. And like, where's my life? No, it's your life will some other time. You know, you have to do this so you can do this, so you can do this, so you can do this, and be more efficient. So that you can be even more efficient. So you can make more money, so you can invest that and make even more money, so that you can make even more money, right? And so being rich is good, so being richer is better, right? So as we distort the sphere into a lineal line, we lose touch with sanity. We lose touch with reality. Sanity is the correlation with reality. Insanity is the delusion of the cult. We want this and not this. We want our daughter to have a good education. I mean, if she commits suicide because nobody will listen to her feelings and she's being shamed and and we're shouting at her because she didn't get an A. I mean, but she got an A. I mean, now she's dead, but the important thing, is the last report card, before she died was an A. And more is better of this and this. You have extremism. When you take the circle and stretch it out, you get extremism. You get the pursuit of the irrational ideal, the pursuit of the lineal dogma, right? Racial purity, if you follow it all the way back. That was Hitler, and the US and England were all kind of dabbling around, with their whole racism of colonization, killing off entire races, giving diseased blankets to Native American Indians, killing off racism because, they weren't the real race, us, right? If you take racism, to its logical conclusion, you have to follow it all the way back to the African plains with less than 1,000 people alive. And, some of those weren't perfectly pure either. So-and-so had incest with a cousin. We don't like that. Let's kill them off. And then, the old, that child wasn't quite the genetic perfection. It wasn't, she was 38 when she had that child. Genes are distorting a little bit. Get rid of that line. Then we go down to the final couple, right? And then we all know that men are better than women, if you're a chauvinist, or that women are better than men if you're an anti-chauvinist. So we have to get rid of them, right? The other one, the one that, why should we keep the one that isn't really up to snuff, right? And now we have the perfect, obsolete, extinct species, right? All mutations eradicated. All diversity, all minorities subjugated. The perfect species that doesn't exist, right? It's the only logical conclusion. If you really want to be purist, whether you're Aryan or this or that, the other, you've got to go back and the purist around the law. Well, just arrest 75% of your population and have the other 25% guard them until you all die of starvation because there aren't any farmers. Because in most cults, 75% of the people are criminals that just haven't been caught yet within the 50,000 laws subjugated, imposed and stuck on a people. So, the question, since we all want well-being and we don't want to feel bad, the question is it the short term or the long term that we're focusing on? Because if we're focusing on just this moment, a little bit of extra sugar, dear, a little bit more marmalade, another cup of coffee, another Danish, another episode of Netflix. Anything else I can get you? The temperature up, down, another Danish, another cookie? Bigger TV, perhaps? Is your dopamine level absolutely up at the maximum point? Maybe you have a massage. Don't get up, don't get up. No, that would take an effort, right? That's short term. Pleasure. Hedonistic. It's just that the short the perfect short-term pleasure seems to correlate with the greatest long-term suffering. You get fat, you get sores on your leg, get arthritis, you get obese, develop diabetes, get irritable. So the perfect short-term pleasure, cocaine. Let's just do more and more and more cocaine. The perfect short-term pleasure creates the most horrible long-term. And